So one of the things that we have been very, very pleased to see is the IFIs, the development banks, actually come to the table to support solutions within fragile communities. And the reason that that matters is that it means that you get the buy-in of the government itself, right? Because the government needs to be putting forward their development solution. They're leading on the design, they're leading on the next steps, and then the financing comes in to enable them to build that infrastructure. So to take one example, in Somalia, we're working with communities that have been displaced by conflict, also by climate. And they're communities that have had a hard time coming back home and building a life for themselves because of the ongoing drought. And with the support of the African Development Bank, we've been able to work with them so that farmers who would otherwise not be able to grow crops because of drought are able to tap into the Juba River so they can irrigate their crops. Now that's a very, very small intervention, but it's the kind of thing that makes an enormous difference to millions of people moving forward. That's the kind of work we really need to be incentivizing.
Thank you so much. And same question to Kelly Clemens. Maybe building on what Amy just said. When the special advisor took his mandate, I was very happy because I said that finally we can carry the debate beyond the limits of the humanitarian sector. We can bring in governments, we can bring in development specialists, just as Mrs. Pope just reminded us. You in UNHCR, what is your experience with that? Do we succeed with that? How can we make sense, so to say, of the recommendations of the panel, and how to kind of have a more comprehensive approach in order to deal with the plights of people that, as you just reminded us, are usually displaced for an entire generation?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. Really complimenting what Amy has just said. We back in 2018, 2019, where the Global Compact on Refugees was adopted, there was a specific approach that we would not see refugees in a parallel way in terms of support. If they were included, if you focused on self-reliance, which I mentioned a little bit at the top, if you reinforced the government structures in order to be able to bring refugees, for example, refugee kids into education, rather than having a parallel school system, and reinforcing then the Ministry of Education at the local level, for example, like what we are trying to do in Chad with Sudanese refugees coming across the border in very remote parts of the country. That's a much more efficient way to go, but it also allows then the government to include those refugees into their national development plans and then see this long-term support that is possible through development partners. The recognition through the compact that it would not just be a humanitarian response in terms of being able to support the hosts, that some of them, of course, that have been hosts for decades, that there is a real responsibility sharing that is required. And that goes to a much longer term element. And to build on what the DG has just said, since 2017 now, we've seen with international financial institutions that there have been $5 billion leveraged through the host and refugee window to IDA that then can complement what comes from other development sources, for example,